The realm. Do you know what the realm is? It's the 1,000 blades of Aegon's enemies. A story we agree to tell each other over and over till we forget that it's a lie.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back for my first official breakdown for the final season of Game of Thrones. This will be my first of many videos about this episode, but let's dive right into it. The first thing I want to say is I believe there was a lot of foreshadowing in this episode. I did notice many things that could indicate which direction the final season is heading in, but let's start off with the opening scene. They were not kidding when they said this would be very reminiscent of King Robert Baratheon's arrival in the first episode of Season 1. Not only did they play the same exact music, but we also saw another little boy climbing something in order to get a good view of everyone arriving. That little kid definitely reminded me of Bran when he was climbing the castle back in Season 1. Now I will say that some of the scenes did feel a little rushed at times. I know they only have 6 episodes to wrap up the rest of the story, but I think they should have given a couple scenes a little bit more room to breathe. Now this episode opened up exactly like most of us thought. Most of what we saw was basically through the eyes of Arya Stark, which is also very similar to how we saw King Robert's arrival in Season 1. In that first episode, we saw Sandor Clegane come through the gates with the bastard Joffrey Baratheon, but this time he came with another bastard who is actually Robert Baratheon's son, which is Gendry. Now most of you who have been following my channel for a long time should already know how I feel about Arya and Gendry. I've been wanting these two characters to get back together for many seasons now. This is something else that could have also been set up in the first season when we saw Robert and Ned speaking together in the crypts of Winterfell.
We were meant to rule together. If your sister had lived, we'd have been bound by blood. Well, it's not too late. I have a son, you have a daughter. We'll join our houses.
Robert wanted to join their houses ever since he fell in love with Lyanna Stark, but as we all know, that never happened. Robert was hoping he could still join their houses by having Sansa and Joffrey get married, but that never happened either. However, this can still be done through Arya and Gendry. They were definitely giving us some teases of this possibility in the episode. Now, as we all know, the Northerners are not very fond of outsiders. Not only does Jon have Targaryens and Lannisters showing up, but he also has Dany's foreign army showing up as well. It was clear that the Northerners were not very happy about this, but I did love what Dany did when Jon made her aware of that. As soon as Jon told Dany the Northerners do not trust outsiders, Dany thought this would be a good time to introduce them to her dragons. That's right, Winterfell. There is a new sheriff in town, and she is not to be taken lightly. Samwell Tarly's family had to learn that the hard way, but I'll get into that later. Now I want to talk about what happens when Jon and Dany actually get inside of the castle walls to greet Bran and Sansa. As you all know, I have been highly anticipating the reunion between Jon Snow and Bran Stark. I've been waiting for this day ever since Jon left Winterfell in the second episode of the show. I was very happy that Jon and Bran were able to reconnect before one of them gets killed, but of course, Bran is a super weirdo, which Jon did notice right away. I thought it was funny when Jon looked at Sansa like, who the hell is this guy? Then it gets even more uncomfortable when Sansa and Dany meet for the first time. I thought it was clear that Sansa was throwing some major shade at Dany. Here Dany is trying to compliment Sansa on how beautiful she is, but Sansa's just like, yeah, whatever, Winterfell was yours, your grace. Now, if you remember, this is exactly what Ned Stark said to Robert Baratheon when he showed up. So we can see this opening scene has many different similarities to the first episode of Season 1.
9 years. Why haven't I seen you? Where the hell have you been?
Guarding the north for you, your grace. Winterfell is yours.
Now what happens next is definitely one of the things I felt was rushed. Right as Sansa and Dany are talking, Bran interrupts them to tell Dany they don't have enough time for all the hugs and kisses. The Night King is coming, and he has your damn dragon. Bran was not messing around when he said that to Dany. He was super aggressive, but at the same time they have to understand they seriously cannot play any games. The only thing I didn't like about this is they did not give Dany very much time to react to the news of the Night King taking her dragon. They did show her and Jon's face very quick, but then they cut the scene. I was hoping we can hear Dany say something about this. I wanted to know what she had to say because she will have to come to terms with the fact that she might have to be the one to kill Viserion for the second time. Now the next scene also shows something that I think most of us expected. Here we get our first council meeting in Winterfell. I think it's safe to say that Lyanna Mormont is not happy that Jon bent the knee. My god, did she lay into Jon Snow's ass in that scene. She did not hold back when letting him know exactly how she felt. As I've said before, this was expected. We did know all the Northerners would be very upset at Jon, but they're soon going to find out that he did make the right choice. As of right now, not too many characters have seen the Army of the Dead. They still don't understand just how real and dangerous they are. Once they do see the dead face to face, they will be begging Daenerys to use her dragons. They will be thanking their old gods Daenerys brought all the Unsullied and Dothraki soldiers. It won't be long before they realize just how badly they need Daenerys Targaryen's support. Now, I was hoping that we could get a reunion between Jorah Mormont and Lyanna Mormont somewhere during that scene, but I'm guessing they're saving that for later. Maybe we can get that in the next episode. I really can't wait to see what Lyanna has to say to Jorah for disgracing their family name. Now, during this scene, Sansa does mention something that I have voiced my concern about as well. How the hell are they going to feed all these men? The North only has enough food to feed the North. Like Sansa said, she did not account for thousands and thousands of extra soldiers. Not to mention, Dany does have 2 big-ass dragons that need to be fed as well. Now we just have to hope they don't get so hungry they start to eat the children again. Did anyone else love Dany's response as much as I did? I was happy that she fired right back at Sansa. When Sansa says, "What do dragons eat anyway?" Dany says, "Whatever they want." Then she looks right at Sansa, almost as if, "That's right, Sansa, I can get nasty too." Now let's move on to Sansa and Tyrion Lannister's reunion, because I do think we got some foreshadowing right at the end of the scene. I think most of us were highly anticipating these two characters meeting again. Just like Tyrion said, they haven't seen each other since Joffrey's wedding. It's funny because when Tyrion mentions that, Sansa does say something else that I thought was very funny. He said the wedding was a miserable affair. Then Sansa said, "It had its moments," which we all know what she is referring to. When we saw that little rat bastard drop dead, what a spectacular moment. Now during this scene, they talk about Cersei sending her soldiers to help fight the Army of the Dead. You can see that Sansa does hurt Tyrion's feelings during that scene. She can't believe that Tyrion would actually believe Cersei. Sansa already knows that Cersei isn't about to send any men. Then she insults Tyrion's intelligence when she said she used to think he was the cleverest man alive. Now, what happens after Sansa walks away is where I believe we get our foreshadowing. Did any of you notice the way Bran was looking at Tyrion Lannister? I think he is already suspicious of Tyrion's intentions. I think he's about to go check Tyrion's internet history. Don't be surprised if Bran starts to look into the werewood net to see what Tyrion and Cersei talked about after their final scene together ended. Remember, when Tyrion noticed Cersei was holding her stomach and not drinking any alcohol, he did come to the realization that Cersei had to be pregnant. Right as Tyrion says that to Cersei, the scene cuts away. We don't know what else was said, but the look on Bran's face after Sansa walks away from the conversation makes me think we could get a reveal about Tyrion in a later episode. Don't forget about one of my recent videos either. I don't know how many of you saw it, but not only do I think Tyrion will betray Daenerys, but I also think Varys will betray Daenerys as well. I think we get some more of the foreshadowing for this later in the episode, when we see Davos talking to Tyrion and Varys. Alright folks, so now I want to come to the reunion I have been anticipating the most, and that is the reunion between Jon Snow and Arya Stark. In the scene, we can see that Arya uses her Faceless Men skills to sneak up on Jon, which she does mention. "How did you sneak up on me?" Jon actually has no idea how much training Arya has went through, nor does he even want to know how many people Arya has killed, which is also mentioned when he notices she still has Needle. Now, one thing I did find interesting is Arya did not show Jon her Valyrian steel dagger. Jon shows her Longclaw, and she even mentions that it's Valyrian steel, but she did not show Jon that she has her own Valyrian steel. I wonder why that is. Also, Arya said that Jon's sword was too heavy, which I also find interesting because one thing we do know about Valyrian steel is it's not as heavy as it looks. Valyrian steel is actually lighter than most swords. Based on this scene, it does seem like Arya is becoming her old self a little more. We did see her smile in the episode many times, and she even wants to support Sansa as much as she does Jon. Hopefully that is a sign that Arya will not go totally to the dark side. Now that she's back home and around all of her family, maybe it's not too late for Arya to live some sort of a normal life, assuming she doesn't die in one of the upcoming battles. Now let's go down to King's Landing where Cersei learns that the Army of the Dead are advancing south. Cersei does not give a damn, and Qyburn gives a look like, "This bitch is crazy." Then we get our first good look at Harry Strickland, commander of the Golden Company. Right down below in the cabin is where Euron is keeping Yara Greyjoy. I was happy to see that she is not only alive, but she does still have her tongue as of right now. Now this scene may have also had some foreshadowing. Yara tells Euron, "You are fighting for the losing side." Euron says exactly what I thought he would do. He says, well, then I will sail the Iron Fleet somewhere else. Now that Euron and Cersei are having sex, I don't see that happening right away. Euron will do everything that he can to either marry Cersei and become the king, or he will try to kill Cersei and become the king. But there is also a third option. Whenever Euron does realize he's fighting for the losing side, I can easily see him abandoning King's Landing. Either way, Cersei cannot trust Euron Greyjoy. That was foreshadowed a couple times already too.
My armada owns the Narrow Sea.
Euron Greyjoy's armada owns the Narrow Sea.
Euron Greyjoy is loyal to me.
For now.
The scene that I like to reference is when Tychos from the Iron Bank told Cersei what would happen. You might have Euron Greyjoy at your side right now, but you won't have him at your side forever. Then we get one of the scenes from the trailer, where Cersei meets with Euron and Harry Strickland. Unfortunately, we will not see the elephants fighting in any of the battles. Now after Harry Strickland leaves, Euron does exactly what I said he would do. He would talk Cersei into having sex with him. Now in my opinion, I did think that Cersei would play a little harder to get. I was expecting him to have to get a little more threatening before Cersei would bend, but nonetheless, she did realize now that Jaime is gone, she cannot afford to lose Euron Greyjoy too. He has already shown his value many times. Now I do have to admit, the scene we got with Bran was very unexpected. I did think we would see him, but I did not think it would be like this. Cersei thinks it would be poetic justice if Tyrion got killed with the same crossbow that he used to kill their father. Well, Tyrion and Jaime, but you know what I mean. Now of course they did make it look like Bran was considering the offer, but I do not believe Bran will try to kill either one of them. I know he is a sellsword, but come on, Jaime and Tyrion are his homies. I just really don't see either one of them getting killed that way. Alright, now the next scene was something I did predict in one of my videos. I said the easiest way for Theon to get Yara back without having to go up against Euron at full force is to catch him slipping in the middle of the night. Almost like a Navy SEALs mission. The only thing that didn't happen is I was hoping Theon would set Euron's ships on fire before he left. That would have really crippled Cersei and Euron's force. Now although I did think it would happen, it did seem a little rushed and a little too easy for Theon. He was able to get Yara free and have her looking all cleaned up within a matter of minutes. Theon rescues her in the first scene, then it immediately cuts to them far out at sea. I think they should have made these two different scenes separate, that way it felt like some time had went by, but that's just me. Now what's interesting is Theon is now heading to Winterfell to fight in the battle against the Night King. So we might not see Theon and Euron face off until the second half of the season, unless we see Yara try to kill him. Since her and Theon seem to be going their separate ways, you have to wonder what they will do with Yara from here on out. I hope she doesn't just disappear from the story until the end of the season. Now Yara did say something that could be foreshadowing a future event. When we hear her talk about the Iron Islands, she says Daenerys will need somewhere to retreat to if they can't hold the North. Somewhere the Night King cannot reach with his entire army, like an island. That could be foreshadowing Jon, Dany, and everyone else having to flee from Winterfell back to the sea. Now if you remember in one of the most recent trailers, we could see that Dany had her back turned to Jon. The fireplace in the room looks like the one on Dragonstone, so maybe Jon and Dany do have to leave the North. Even if they did beat the Night King at Winterfell, the castle still may take too much damage for anyone to live there, so we may see them back on Dragonstone. Either way, it does look like Theon is starting to get some of his confidence back. Hopefully that means he can be very useful during the battle for Winterfell, because as we all know, they do need every swinging dick in the field, although Theon no longer has a dick. Alright, so now let's get back to some more of the foreshadowing from the episode. We go back to Winterfell, where we see the Karstarks have arrived, but I want to talk about the conversation Davos has with Tyrion and Varys. In that scene, Davos is talking to Tyrion and Varys about loyalty. Now try to remember, if you saw my video about Tyrion and Varys betraying Dany, then you would know it was their loyalty that has been put into question many times. Now Davos may have been talking about the Northern men and Daenerys, but you have to read between the lines here. It's no coincidence that Tyrion and Varys are together once again, during a conversation about loyalty. When they do notice Jon and Dany together, they start to talk about how they won't be as needed or wanted around like they used to. You can get a sense that Tyrion and Varys may start to feel like they are underappreciated. Remember, this conversation started off with them talking about loyalty, and the conversation ends with Varys saying, "Nothing lasts forever."
If you ever think I'm failing the people, you won't conspire behind my back. You'll look me in the eye as you have done today, and you'll tell me how I'm failing them.
I swear it, my queen.
I think that may be once again foreshadowing a betrayal coming from Tyrion and Varys. Now let's move on to Jon and Dany's scene. This leads to one of the moments I have been waiting for quite some time. Jon Snow, also known as Aegon Targaryen, ride Dany's dragon Rhaegal, which is named after his father, Rhaegar Targaryen. I thought this would actually happen after Jon finds out that he is a Targaryen. I thought it would be that revelation that gave Dany and Jon the confidence that Jon could even ride a dragon by himself. But they had him ride the dragon before he found out. Now, was it just me, or did Rhaegal look like he was extra green in the episode? I think it really stood out. Now, we already know Jon had a connection with the dragons, or at least Drogon, but I was surprised at how easy it was for him to mount Rhaegal. I was expecting a little more resistance. Rhaegal did not even hesitate to let Jon on his back. I thought that was interesting. I guess you could say Jon was born to ride that dragon. Now that should make the battle for Winterfell even more interesting. The Night King may have a dragon, but Dany still has 2 dragons, and she now has 2 riders. This can make their dragon strikes so much more accurate now that someone is directing the other one. There will be a dance with dragons right over Winterfell, which should make for one hell of a sight to see. Now when Jon and Dany do get off the dragons, Dany said something to Jon that immediately reminded me of Ygritte for some reason. When Dany looks at the waterfall, she says, "We could stay here for 1,000 years," which basically means that Dany wants to stay there with Jon forever. Now if you remember, right as Ygritte is about to die, she says, "We should have stayed in that cave." Hopefully that doesn't mean Dany dies right in Jon's arms. And before she dies, she says, "We should have stayed at the waterfall." Oh yeah, one other thing. Who else thought it was really funny when Drogon was staring at Jon when he was kissing Daenerys? I couldn't help but laugh at the look on Drogon's face. That shit was funny. Now in the next scene, we get a double dose of reunions. Arya sees Gendry, and she talks to Sandor Clegane for the first time ever since she left him for dead, which the Hound did mention right away. I was hoping that Arya and Sandor would have some more time to talk, but this did open up more time for Arya and Gendry to talk. Like I said at the beginning of the video, they were showing some of the chemistry between Arya and Gendry right away. They complimented each other's looks, and Arya smiled at him several times. Then she did that little flirting turnaround and smiled as she left the room. You ladies know exactly what I'm talking about. Now I am interested in getting a good look at the weapon Gendry makes for Arya. I'm assuming it's the one we see her use in the trailer when she's fighting on the battlements. Now I want to get to the scene everyone was asking about during the off-season. This is when we see Daenerys and Jorah go to visit Samwell Tarly. Obviously, Dany thanks Sam for saving Jorah's life, but Sam says something that I want everyone to remember. Sam tells Dany that he had taken some of the books from the Citadel. This is foreshadowing those books coming into play later. You could see that Sam was already looking through them when Dany showed up, but he will eventually find something in those books that is a big revelation. I'm guessing it's going to have something to do with the Night King, and that may lead to Sam telling Bran where to look inside of the werewood net for answers. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Those books were referenced because they will come up again. Now the moment everyone has been waiting for is when Sam finds out that Dany killed his brother and father. Now we already know that Sam and Randall did not have a very good relationship, but Sam did love his brother. He was obviously very hurt by that news. Now do I think Sam will betray Jon or Daenerys because of that? Absolutely not. But it could make things very uncomfortable for the next few episodes. Regardless of how upset Sam is, he still does need to protect little Sam and Gilly, and he knows that Daenerys and Jon give him the best chance of defeating the Night King. I don't see Sam leaving anytime soon. He has to be there to help Bran find the answers. Now trust me, it does suck that Sam's brother chose to stand by his father, but he did make that decision on his own. You can clearly see that Sam is heartbroken when he leaves the room, but that does lead to another very interesting scene. When Sam goes outside, he sees Bran Stark, who is sitting out there waiting for an old friend. Now you might think he was talking about Sam, but we later find out who he might have actually been talking about, which is Jaime Lannister, who shows up in the final scene. Now I was really hoping that Bran told Jon about Rhaegar and Lyanna, or at the very least I wanted Bran to be in the room when it happened. I also did not like that Bran said he is not Jon's brother. I mean, sure, if you want to get technical, it's true. Jon and Bran are not brothers, but I mean, come on, they grew up like brothers and as brothers. I was also surprised that Dany did not tell Jon she executed Sam's brother and father. She obviously already told Jorah Mormont, and I wonder why she didn't tell Jon. I can only assume that she knew Sam and Jon were friends because Sam was the one that sent the letter to Dragonstone about all the dragonglass, unless Jon never said his last name. But I did think it was odd that Jon did not know. You would think someone would have told him what happened during the battle. Even Tyrion Lannister could have said something. But anyway, let's get to the scene that everyone was waiting for since the very first book was released. Now, I did think this would happen later, but Jon finds out about Lyanna and Rhaegar in the opening episode. Sam tells Jon, "You're not just a king of the North, you're the king of the Seven Kingdoms." This is about to make shit very interesting between Jon and Daenerys. Not only are they related, but Jon now has the better claim to the Iron Throne. What's Daenerys gonna have to say about that? How will that affect their relationship? What about Sansa and the rest of the Northerners? I mean, that is a lot for everyone to take in. We already know Lord Glover did not show up in Winterfell, but what about the other lords that are there? Could we see any of their supporters begin to abandon them? For some reason, I think this will have a bigger effect on Sansa than it will Arya. I could see Sansa becoming even more distant from Jon. Then again, I also think when the Night King shows up, none of that's gonna matter. That's when they will truly learn that they need everyone, no matter which family they come from. But I do really want to move on to the next scene because I think it's easily one of the most fascinating scenes from the episode. Here we can see Mr. Dondarrion and Mr. Giantsbane. This scene was shown in the trailer, and I did say I thought it would be the Last Hearth or the Carhold, because it did look like a different castle than the ones we usually see. You can tell that something happened here, but we do not see any dead bodies laying around. That most likely means the Night King has already turned them all into whites. Now when they go inside, they do run into Lord Commander Ed and the rest of the Night's Watch that is left. This is when we get a very interesting reveal. Little Ned Umber is dead. The Night King had his body mounted to the wall, and surrounding his body is the same symbol we have seen time and time again. Now what happens to the symbol is what I really want to talk about. When Ned Umber comes back as a white, Beric Dondarrion stabs him with the burning sword. That causes the entire symbol to catch on fire. Now take a look at the imagery. Remember where we have seen that symbol before. We saw this at the Three-Eyed Raven's Cave, which is also the same location the Night King was created. As I've said before, the Night King has to be getting his magical abilities from the same place as the Children of the Forest since they did create him. After all, he was tied around a weirwood tree when they shoved the dragonglass into his chest. When he became the Night King, he had very similar powers as the Children of the Forest. Not only can he enter the mind of animals and other people, but he can also go inside of the weirwood net. The Night King could even affect things inside of the weirwood net because he did that when he grabbed Bran's arm. This is how the Night King is getting all of his powers. The Night King leaves that symbol because it represents the same thing that gives him those magical abilities. So, maybe in order to defeat the Night King, you might have to actually burn down his main power source, which might be the weirwood trees. They might have to burn, just like we see symbolized at the end of the scene. This is something that Melisandre talks about time and time again in the books. Melisandre is always having the weirwood trees burned down, and she even says to Jon, "Burn these weirwoods and accept Winterfell as a gift of the Lord of Light." Since the Night King seems to be getting his powers from the weirwoods, they might have to burn them down. The heart tree at Winterfell may also have to be burned. It's also interesting that the weirwoods are also called heart trees because as we see on Melisandre's banners, there is a burning heart. Now you could also say the symbol looks a lot like the Targaryen sigil. Either way, I think the symbols have a deeper meaning, because the Night King has been leaving them behind ever since the very first episode of the show. I will be releasing another video about this soon, but first, I will have to take some more time to do a little research. Now the very last scene had me just as excited as this one. This was one hell of a cliffhanger, very similar to how the first episode in Season 1 ended. Bran actually set his ass out there all night, all jacked up on Adderall, just waiting for his old friend to show up. I can't even explain the feeling that I had when Bran and Jaime locked eyes in the courtyard. This is easily one of the most highly anticipated reunions in not just Game of Thrones history, but also television history, in my opinion. Now, we know they don't kill Jaime just based on the trailer alone. We already saw Jaime fighting in the battle for Winterfell, but I do wonder when Jaime's little secret gets exposed in front of everyone. Since things are moving so fast, I have to assume this will come out almost right away. Like I have said in other videos about this confrontation, ultimately I think Bran Stark will forgive Jaime. Actually, Bran is so out of touch, who really knows what the hell he says? But I have always said that Bran most likely sees him becoming the new Three-Eyed Raven as part of his destiny, almost like something that had to happen. Now that doesn't mean every other Stark will see things like that, but I think Bran will. Either way, it still doesn't take away from the scene. Even though I do think Bran forgives him, I still had goosebumps when their eyes met. I was on the edge of my seat just waiting to see what happened next, but HBO cut it off just at the right moment to have us all wanting more. I absolutely love that as the final scene. I thought it was a perfect way to end the episode that already had so many similarities to Season 1's first episode. I'm definitely anxious to see how things play out between Jaime and Bran, and Jon and Dany, now that Jon knows who he is. And of course, I want to know where the Night King strikes next. Anyways, I want to thank all of you for stopping by to watch the video. Like I said, this will be the first of many videos I make about the opening episode. I've only seen the episode once, so I still need to take a second and third look. There is still so much to digest. Hopefully you did subscribe to my channel by now because I will be releasing a shitload of videos during the 6 weeks. I would love to see you all come back for the next one. Have a great day. I'll see you soon. Bye.